Artificial Intelligence Institute, or the NAII, at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. He received his BS in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, his medical doctorate from Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern. There are a few Illinois contacts in the room, as you might know. Diagnostic Radiology Residency at the University of California, Irvine, Neuroradiology Fellowship at Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California. He also serves on the board of directors at the Southern California Institute for Research and Education, or SCIRE, and has expertise in leading AI pilots, bridging research into operations. He's board certified in diagnostic radiology, neuroradiology, and clinical informatics. Dr. Kim has received a variety of awards, including Chief Resident, Chief Fellow, Intern of the Year, Teacher of the Year, and Best Healthcare Group Chief. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I
can close that.
Let's just close that. I don't know why they're telling us that.
Hi. So thank you so much for inviting me here to speak. I have a wonderful, beautiful campus and a renowned department that you should be really proud of. Just a little background. I was inspired a lot of going into clinical informatics from some of the work that Dr. Hirsch has done over his career. And I know that there's incredible work being done at OHSU, so you should be proud of the work you guys are doing here and the institution you work at. I moved here locally and reached out to Dr. Hirsch, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'll be giving a brief overview of what the NAII is, or NAII, and the National Artificial Intelligence Institute, and then talk a little bit more of a deeper dive on what we're doing in terms of policy from a federal regulatory standpoint and requirement standpoint regarding the governance of artificial intelligence. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. What I say doesn't necessarily mean that's what the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is saying. And there are a few slides that talk about specific vendor products. By no means am I endorsing those products, nor is the federal government. Okay, so I talked about the agenda earlier. So why AI at VA? Why do we think it is not just important, but also an actual national strategic asset? It's really the size. It's the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States. 1,200 medical facilities, 140 full-fledged medical center facilities within them, over 100,000 healthcare workers. We have the largest genomic depository in the world, approaching close to 1 million, which we anticipate this year, called the Million Veteran Program. Our imaging depository is 10 billion. If you include backup records, it's actually closer to 30, 40 billion medical images. We do extensive amount of telehealth, and we serve a very large, important population, which is the veterans, these people who have served their country, many of them service-connected and disabled. And it's really our true north, and why I enjoy working at the VA so much is really the mission. So the National Artificial Intelligence Institute's mission statement really is to seek how we can help lead in this organization and the VA to become a preeminent organization for research, development, and training of artificial intelligence with a global impact and really keeping the veteran in the forefront. There is a lot of interest from a regulatory standpoint, policy standpoint, that's come out over the last several years. One of the most important in terms of AI governance is EO 13960. If you're not familiar with the executive orders that come out from the White House, it's the president's authority. While it is not a congressional law that affects all U.S. citizens, it is in terms of, in practice of the federal government, has the force of law. So as a federal employee, this carries the force of law. So I have to do this. And we'll go talk a little bit about EO 13960. 13859 is really an office of the White House really saying that this is a national concern. Like, we need to be a leader. It's an international competition, which we're aware of, including allies and adversaries. And we need to position all sectors of industry, including healthcare, but also other sectors as well. And we need to invest and develop in this space. There have been several important strategic documents that have come out over the last several years, including the White House Office of Science and Technology Program, National AI Research and Development Strategy, including a very recent update. The key change in the recent update is an emphasis on international collaboration with allies and partners. And there's also been agency-specific strategies I've produced, including the VA having its own AI strategy and joint VA Department of Defense strategies. These several items have been codified into law, particularly creating this office called the National AI Initiative under the Office of White House Science Technology Program that was included in the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. You may have heard, it did catch some news about last year about a non-binding guidance document. The executive orders are binding, non-binding guidance document called the White House Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, released last year. And really doubles down on the importance of why we need to move the needle on responsible, or what we call in the federal government, trustworthy artificial intelligence, and highlights 5 key pillars, which we'll talk about in that section at the top. How do we choose and select our work? It's a very large organization, a very matrix size, the size and scale, which I spoke to earlier. And we really take a variety of inputs. You know, we have an advisory council. We obviously want to have a very patient-centric and veteran-centric view on what we work on, what do they think about it. We'll talk a little bit about some veteran surveys that have gone out. Medical center inputs, where the rubber meets the road, and healthcare operations delivery. We have a very large AI VA community, which I'll put a plug at the end. We have over 1,000 people involved in that community to provide teaching resources, other ways to connect and try to solve problems. And there has been an AI task force that has been charged by the Undersecretary of Health, Dr. Elnahal. The Undersecretary of Health is, in effect, the CEO of the largest health administration. And he has charged Dr. Carolyn Clancy, who is an Assistant Undersecretary for Dean, that this is a priority. How do we accelerate responsible AI in operations and also governance? The AI network centers are a key part of our strategy at the National Artificial Intelligence Institute. It's not a single central program office. It's not a single VMC. And there are multiple reasons why this has been an effective strategy for us. It includes diversity of talent, different skills. I have one of these centers, incredibly talented data engineering, while another one is incredibly good at large language models. And using the diversity talent pool across the country is helpful. Also, the patient populations are diverse. We want to make sure that our data, it comes from different areas to make sure it is reproducible and can be scaled. We have communicated at our recent conference that we are anticipating growing this AI network. I don't have an official green light because I need to make sure that my budget is completely approved, but we anticipate that there'll be support to expand this network across the United States. And notably, we would want to have geospatial diversity as well. And I cannot help to notice that there's a large opportunity in the Pacific Northwest. So we can talk about that later offline. The network, really helps us collaborate with academic institutions. We're collaborating with their VA institution. A lot of the talent we know is not in the VA, to be bluntly honest, right? We don't pay competitively enough. We don't have large academic institutions. And the relationship the Department of Veterans Affairs has had with academic institutions is longstanding and important. The vast majority of healthcare professionals have spent some time in their career training in the VA. If you, I very rarely have met anyone who has not trained at the VA in some part of their career. And it's the academic institutions such as here, where a lot of the innovation, a lot of the cutting edge research, where can we collaborate? The VA has no intent to do this alone. It's really collaborating with industry and academia to have a shared practice to try to move the needle and accelerate trustworthy artificial intelligence to benefit veterans. There are a variety of domains and specialty areas. By no stretch of imagination is the NAII consider the controller and overseer of all those domains. The Million Veteran Program has its own program. The Precision Knowledge College program has its own program, and there are many other programs. It's us as the kind of convener regarding when it comes to policy, strategy, and where I particularly am focused on is how do we take their great work and translate it into operations, where I think there is a big divide, and I don't think the VA is the only organization that has that research to operations gap. The AI strategy, it's a document. It aligns to a lot of these principal documents, and rather than go into a massive overview, the highlights really are that we were one of the first. It was really inclusive, and we took inputs across the organization. and really highlighting 5 key execution priorities. The community which I spoke to, that we have to prioritize and invest. Your priorities are where you're resourcing. How do we, get that apex leadership support to break down the barriers to get through the bureaucracy to get tangible, actionable projects going? And how do we make sure that it's veteran-centric and provide that subject matter expertise to be the convener and bridger across this organization? I'm going to skip this slide pretty quickly. This is basically the Office of White House Science Technology Program, pointing out some of the leadership that the VA was doing at the time, working on the strategy and trying to accelerate this in the federal government. I do want to come back to the importance of partnerships with academia and industry here. I'm going to focus on the industry aspect. One of our things that we've been doing since inception has been doing this thing called the AI tech sprint, which is really a challenge, right? You create a problem statement. You create a testing platform or environment where companies can compete to solve that challenge. You may have heard terms like hackathons and stuff like that. It's similar to that, but here we're bringing the technology companies, whether they're small business startups or whether they're technology giants, such as the ones we know about. And we compete them, a meritocracy on the same data, same challenge, and create consistency. And do they meet the requirements that we're looking for the VA? Do they solve the problem? Qualitative metrics, quantitative metrics, transparency on their models, and et cetera, et cetera. This is a process we have done and we continue to do and invest in as a method to select cases. Here is a case example of the AI tech sprint producing innovation in a competitive fashion. This was a tech sprint winner from 3 years ago. It took that long to really navigate the steps needed to bring innovation to the VA. This company is a Cura patient. They won a challenge regarding a digital health platform that had native AI ML capabilities to help manage chronic conditions. You can see in this photo, Dr. Carolyn Clancy, our national executive sponsor, Dr. Arturo, that's standing behind her, who's the director of the NAII, who I report to. And here on the bottom right is really that partnership. Here, I'm actually in this picture in flip-flops with a mask on in the era of COVID. And here we're wireframing with the company. I have my chief health informatics officer. I have clinicians. I have engineers in the room collaborating, trying to solve problems together. And I'm proud to announce, I believe this is the very first FedRAMP High ATO approval for a digital health platform in the VA that has native AI ML capabilities. It's currently being engineered and integrated into Vista right now with support of the Chief Technology Office. And really exciting to bring this capability to VA. I have no interest to cloister and hold it together to myself. My goal is to be the convener and facilitator. I want to take the best research that has proven solutions, do implementation, science show it's trustworthy, make sure it's checking all our governance processes, and help facilitate this and give access to this to all the innovators, research and developers, and operation leaders across the country. But hopefully this will continue to accelerate this fiscal year. Speaking to this specific platform, this is this is part of why I'm so interested in this field, and I did a pivot in my career with this. Is I think the future of healthcare is one squarely in informatics. The technology is such a key piece to this, and here they're going to be doing scheduling from their cell phone, care management, patient engagement, clinical reminders, appointment tracking, APIs to wearables. If you want to go there, that's a whole can of worms talking about patient-generated data through wearables, but really excited to bring this capability to VA. I want to talk about, as I spoke earlier, our CEO, the Undersecretary of Health, really wanted us to focus on what he called, I'm going to say it, non-sexy AI. There's that predictive modeling with genomics, multimodal, you're going to die on this day at this time, but more like, how do we help the workforce handle the mundane? The healthcare worker burnout, that documentation burnout on healthcare workers. How do we streamline workflows and really charge us to look at low-hanging fruit, easier wins, lower risk. And in that deliberation and taking inputs from across the country, there is a technology sprint that's been approved and funded, and we'll announce publicly on challenge.gov. An AI tech sprint focused on what is being branded as the Burnout Breakthrough Challenge. One is to really try to leverage and compete ambient voice to medical documentation. You may have heard some of these vendors and companies, whether Nuance, DAX, Ambisense, or there are a variety of them proliferating, and some of the tech giants are starting to get in the space, including Amazon. And that is one competition that's going to be announced very soon on challenge.gov. The second one is the incredible documentation burden on healthcare workers. You may be familiar with the Mission Act, which if a veteran does not get access to care within a certain time frame or lives geographically far away from a VA medical center, they can get their care outside of the VA. But this is not only an existential crisis for VA in terms of having not being able to take the care of these veterans within our VA, but increases care fragmentation for the healthcare worker now to deal with way more data, digging through tons of PDFs in a non-user-centered design interface with Vista imaging, and really is a tremendous burden on the workforce and also a potential patient safety issue when they might miss something in those PDFs. So this second part of the challenge, we focus on leveraging optical character resolution, natural language processing, and taking out the most salient, important aspects from that voluminous data in PDFs, thousands of pages, to extract it to be reviewed by a healthcare professional. Another one that he wanted to focus on in operations was, worry about PHI, we're worried about risk and clinical decision support, what have you. If you try to Google the term VA policy and VA directive, you will go find hundreds and hundreds of them, right? And this is public data. It's out there, it's structured, and it's official. So I've been working with some companies and HR specialists to see how we can leverage large language models such as OpenAI, GPT 3.5, to see if we can make this perform at a way that can be customer-centric, user-centric, and friendly to help whether you're an administrator, healthcare leader, or an HR specialist to find that specific aspect within that huge database of VA policy or Office of Personnel Management policy or governmental regulation to find that data and that information you're seeking quickly. Digital Command Center is another lane of effort. Really, this stemmed from the concern of what we're calling the last mile problem. We have an organization that is in a legacy system, CPRS Vista. We know that the modernization efforts have had some challenges, but it's still proceeding forward. But how do we create a platform where our data scientists and data engineers can engineer into the clinical workflows of the actual healthcare workers providing that care? You can use CDS hooks and try to engineer something through CPRS Vista. 99% of the healthcare systems don't have access to Oracle Cerner that's operational with tools that they can engineer AI/ML tools. So this project is really trying to solve that problem. And there have been many healthcare systems that are looking at how you leverage data mesh platforms, integrating near real-time data, and also native AI/ML capabilities to enable your data scientists, data engineers to produce new results, focused from a hospital operations standpoint. For example, Johns Hopkins invested a sizable amount of money with the GE platform. Palantir is live at Cleveland Clinic and Tampa General. And there are a variety of healthcare systems that are looking at a variety of data mesh engineered to operational data to try to do predictive modeling for improving streamlining operations. What do I mean? I mean things like length of stay, discharge, clinical deterioration, levels of care, these type of things to drive hospital efficiency. Keep going here. Basically, here is a photo of an actual real-life photo at Johns Hopkins on their approach to the Digital Command Center to streamline and have the right people looking at the right data at the right time and to drive hospital care operation efficiency. Pivoting to trustworthy artificial intelligence, where I started in the beginning of the conversation. I think it's intuitive why it's important, but just to come out and articulate it, we need to make sure that we enhance veteran safety and privacy and that there's confidence in what we provide them. Can we leverage this technology for good and improve their care and make sure that we're compliant with our regulatory requirements? I think trust is a really important word. What does it mean when you unpack that? And what is the current state in your environmental scan? The Pew did a survey of the general population in the United States earlier this year, and about 50% of the American population does not trust AI to be used in healthcare, and about 50% do. It's interesting if you break down the data that there appear to be generational differences with the younger population more accepting of questions such as, would you use a chatbot to get your care and stuff like that. So it's interesting where we are as a country, and the VA is no different. A recent survey that went out had a similar statistical breakdown, and that's problematic, right? You're trying to accelerate something that can have profound impact, including stories of harm. We know that there have been stories of harm with AI in exacerbating racism, inequities, criminal justice, the Boeing Air Max. I mean, you can go on and on. All these stories of harm, and half of my population I serve don't trust it. So what we do in terms of promoting trust, showing that we are doing this and taking seriously and responsibly is incredibly important, and how we actually communicate that to the veterans is incredibly important. As we are required by Executive Order 13960 to make sure we adhere to these 9 principles, at least in the federal government. We have to obviously be lawful, respectful of our nation's values, purposeful and performance-driven, accurate, reliable, and effective, safe, secure, and resilient, understandable, responsible, and traceable, regularly monitored, transparent, and accountable. It gets a lot more complicated than that because the federal government generated a lot of documents, and there's Executive Order 1395 that really focuses on racial equity and support for underserved communities, which when these type of executive orders go out, the other executive orders have to adjust and adapt, make sure they're consistent with that. And part of the White House AI Bill of Rights focuses on doubling down on the importance of racial equity and support for underserved communities. That is another version of that came out in 14991. I talked earlier about the AI Bill of Rights. There is a veteran regulation requiring that we follow this framework for data ethics and data access. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework, onwards and onwards. It's overwhelming. How do you take all this regulation, translate it to something that's understandable and actionable? And we tried to do that. We took every single policy, regulation, or guidance and really broke down into their salient characteristics and did an affinity mapping across them and came up with ended up being 6 main domains. This isn't that different than people are familiar with the CHI group. It's very, very similar. And 6 main pillars are: 1, purposeful, effective and safe, secure and private, fair and equitable, transparent and explainable, accountable and monitored. And through this deliberation and socialization of inputs across different communities and stakeholders, proud to announce that the VA has officially approved the VA Trustworthy AI framework based on our analysis. And this is now the true north for VA's approach for trustworthy artificial intelligence. There's a lot left to do aside from just pointing to a framework and saying you're done. We are actively working on standard operating protocols. It needs to be make sure there's equities and inputs across the organization. VA is very large, from benefits to National Cemetery Administration to Veterans Health Administration, all the program offices across Office of Information Technology. We need to make sure that we have a very accurate database of our AI. Just knowing what's out there is not as simple as you think. There are different ways, whether the IRB processes and research have what they call VAERS, and we have, OIT using their informatics system, and just creating a definitive, centralized AI use case inventory in itself has been a challenge, and definitely really important that we move the needle there. Acquisitions and policies. I can't hold companies accountable to these things unless I have embedded in their contract language. We are working with OGC on templating languages, and whether it's a crate agreement, whether it's a contract, to make sure they're consistent with these frameworks, and we embed that language to them so we can hold them accountable. And my career has been focused mainly at the healthcare system level in operations. So when I see something, I say, okay, what do I do that from the lens of a chief medical officer, chief of staff at a hospital? And I immediately went to let's do some pilots. How do we actually translate this into IRB? How do we actually translate this into an oversight committee at the VAMC level? And knowing that I'm not going to get it right, but what can I learn from that? And that some governance, we would learn about that, and maybe we can share our lessons to something that can inform a national rollout that's uninformed. So I'll talk briefly about what we're calling the Artificial Intelligence Institutional Review Board pilot, the AI Oversight Committee, and model cards. So one idea was in terms of change management, instead of inventing something from the ether out of nowhere, how do you take something that's well established, modify and iterate slightly, and see how it goes? So that was the thinking. The Institutional Review Board has been existing for many, many decades. Obviously it has a storied history, not too dissimilar about the concerns about AI, about racial inequities, in the Belmont Report, et cetera. Where this went was, how do we take a look at existing well-established safety infrastructures like the Institutional Review Board and look at unique specific challenges that AI introduces, and could we develop a toolkit or a guide to help IRB review members navigate those questions on AI? And we did that. It went through an iterative process. We created these checklists. We got inputs from the front line, from IRB administrators, associate chiefs of staff of research, and the actual PIs. And we developed and piloted and tested it. And it's being well received. It's like, wow, this was helpful. I flagged an issue that I wasn't really thinking about. And we end up challenging it and kicking it back to the industry-sponsored study. And as such, we've had these stories. And to talk about one concrete story of a real-life case where this was helpful, was a case at Yale Long Beach where I was at previously, where it was a fluoroscopic in situ hybridization. I think some of these think about like biomarkers or liquid biopsies, and this branding. And basically, they were taking blood samples, they're taking a bunch of CT chest data, they're taking a bunch of PAP data, a bunch of medical record data. And if you look at their IRB protocol, you look at the informed consent, they didn't talk about anything. They talk about what we're going to do with your blood, how I'm going to use it, how we're going to develop the AI model, intellectual property, how the veteran benefits. It was really, really concerning. It was basically a big data grab, including genomic data, and it was really concerning. And going through this module, really caught the attention of the IRB panel, and they actually said, no, we're not doing this. And that was a great win, we thought. And I think what even emphasized even more the importance of that value was we determined this industry-sponsored trial actually got through an IRB at another facility, as is, really showing that this could potentially enhance. Now, I've had tomatoes thrown at me. We don't need this. If the IRB knows what they're doing and knows any data science, that this is superfluous, and we already know about these ethical issues, and why are you doing this? Well, maybe at your incredible center of excellence at this prestigious facility, you're doing 20 AI studies a year, and you are like a nationally known data scientist. But VA's big, 1,200 facilities. We have some level 3 facilities, level 2 facilities, where they might see 1 or 2 of these a year, and they don't have that level of subject matter expertise. Like, we have to think about the larger enterprise issue. How do we develop tools and toolkits to enable the entire enterprise to benefit? So that was rejected. So we took that initial lesson and we said, okay, so we understand research is only part of this. In fact, research is probably way better positioned than the wild, wild west of healthcare operations governance, which is a variety, non-structured, non-standard process. As hopefully it's not everywhere, but it's certainly not as mature and structured as the Institutional Review Board. So we took that concept. How do we take these principles? How do we actually develop a committee focused on this and create a workflow where we're not undermining or duplicative to the IRB process, but we understand what AI is coming out of there, and that we have a governing body with the right tools to govern artificial intelligence that is not research. And thus was born the first AI oversight committee at the VA Medical Center level. The policy, I'm not going to read it. I want to just highlight some key things. You have to have executive sponsorship buy-in, right? The CEO of a VA hospital is a medical center director. And getting that buy-in is so important. If ELT doesn't care, executive leadership team, then it doesn't matter. So talking to the medical center director, he had the buy-in. He's the one who bought into the need for a policy. He's the one who said that we're going to do this. And he is actually responsible, naming himself in saying that he is responsible at this healthcare system to make sure we're compliant with the 13960. It formalized and codifies with the creation of this oversight committee, which reports to the highest committee in that hospital, which is called the Executive Quality Board, but the AI Oversight Committee is considered. AI can happen in healthcare, but it can also happen in operations, supply chain, HR, and it's really the medical center director at the apex of the organization that can convene the whole organization. This is not just a health issue. The key highlights of the policy is that it has a pragmatic approach. Like we can't, there's limited resource, limited bandwidth, and we need to have an approach that takes risk in consideration. And while we want to always have a human in the loop, always have human fallbacks, is that really practical when it comes to your chatbot on your Microsoft Teams, right? You know, it's just not practical, right? So like, you know, there's a high-risk clinical decision support, and we're really concerned on potential errors, and there's not enough monitoring and algorithmic drift, and who's testing this? Like, it's really gives a little bit more ability for this committee to make those judgments using approved risk management frameworks such as the NIST AI risk management framework that's been published. Transparency is an important pillar. I will show a mock-up of a model card, which many people may have seen before, but the idea is like it's not always going to be practical to do some sort of informed consent model card for every single AI ML solution in the world. We have to do it where it makes sense. So I spoke about model cards, and those who are not familiar with model cards, it's really the concept of how do we have a structured way to be transparent about what's under the hood of your AI ML model, right? So whether you buy a box of cereal or cookies, right? Like what's that, US FDA required, structured data, how many calories, how much percent's fat, how much is carbs and stuff like that. And the concept of the model card, this is a real model card that is one of our projects called Agile MD eCart, right? It talks, you can't read it, but I'll let you know that it says, what is the overview? Who are the intended users? What are some ethical considerations and limitations? What was the training data and the publications to substantiate that this is evidence-based, and so on and so forth? And how do you do this in a structured fashion, create that transparency, and have it available for our staff who may have trust issues and our patients that have trust issues? So that's the concept of model cards, which is required by this policy to be deployed. So that basically concludes the talk. Where are we next? It's really taking some of these lessons learned concepts and just accelerating the implementation across VA. In a week and a half, I fly out to DC. I've been charged to help kind of like take these ideas and lessons learned to see how we can not make this 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 centers, but how do we create a strategy and implementation plan that we can scale this across the country. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I know the answers to them.
Yeah, people who are online can just unmute and speak up. We have about over 30 people online. If there's no
And
other...
I can't see if there's any hands raised. Is
Yeah.
anybody online to be able to see if anyone's got a
Yeah,
hand?
people who are online are just going to have to unmute. I guess I'll ask a question.
Sure.
One of my concerns is that, is sort of the translational side of AI. I'm, like probably everyone in this talk, very enthusiastic about it. It has a lot of potential, but the number, there have been a few systematic reviews published now.
Yeah.
There's like 40 or 60 clinical trials that have been done, whereas there's like, if you do a PubMed search, there's thousands of model papers and so forth. What do you see as the path to building the evidence base for AI interventions?
You make a great point. I saw the lecture you spoke to and the systematic review that you pointed to, that there's a paucity of prospective randomized controlled trial studies that actually show, which is what I consider the highest quality evidence and the standard we hold to drug companies and FDA approval. But the FDA approval for AML devices doesn't really require that. And I've had conversations with FDA. How do we move this forward? I think we have to create that requirement internally right now. I might not be absolutely required to do it. FDA's not requiring them to do it, but I might require them to do it, right? So like, what is my threshold? And have a risk-based approach, right? If it is extremely low risk, right, I might have a different threshold than a large language model directly interacting with patients that are predicting suicide, right? Like what's the risk here, right? And then I have a veteran who, you know, the large language model says something wrong, and then I have a crisis, right? Like versus, using optical characters and natural language processing for a document that the doctors and nurses are reviewing anyways, and just to help streamline the workflow. So it really depends on, the use case. But I think culturally, I think we should always point back to that, like, where's the evidence and where's the science for it? So it is a struggle because there is a challenge of, pressure to accelerate and move. And we have to be able to stand and speak up and raise our hands, say, no, this is not right. This is what my requirements are. There's little evidence that's going to work. A lot of assumptions being made. And I don't have a specific concrete thing I can say how we're going to navigate it. But I think it's creating awareness, such as as you pointed out, and creating that expectation internally. Is this something that you would want to use, or your mother or your child? And do you have that level of confidence and trust? And if you don't, then why are you doing it?
A related question, given this governance model, do you expect the sort of driving initial use cases to be kind of top down or generated top down or bottom up? I mean, does part of this infrastructure also say this is where our greatest needs are, or is the governance structure more like this is how we're going to think about proposals that sort of bubble up from whatever individual sites or investigators? Because that's really related also to how are we going to generate high quality evidence? What use cases is that evidence going to be generated around?
You make a great point. We are, largest healthcare system with many offices and administrations, hundreds of facilities, and that's been a challenge, right? Where there are multiple pilots that are similar. Is that redundancy in waste? Should we consolidate our efforts and pick the best one on an evidence-based reason and cost-based reason, or what have you, and select one to scale? And the answer is yes, we should. It's just a challenge to get there. Hopefully, we will get there. But absolutely, that'd be the right thing to do. Is it one versus the other, central versus field? And I don't think it's going to be one or the other, right? A lot of, if there's a great innovation or a great concept that grows from a VA medical center, academic affiliate, merit award, that's at one center, and it has incredible evidence, and that's where it started, in this early research development, and could that be selected to scale? Absolutely. Could a success story from a VISN that's helping the healthcare operations be showcased to other VISNs and scale across the country? Or could it be a national challenge, a charge by the CEO to I want to see, us address this medical documentation issue with the PDFs. I want to see how we can leverage ambient voice dictation to improve the veteran experience and documentation burden on our providers. So some of them will be top down. So I don't have a great answer, but we certainly need to have a better inventory scan, knowing what's out there, and better accountability, so we don't have many redundant solutions and none of them being resourced and supported enough to actually be the definitive winner, because that does happen. But hopefully we'll address that through these governing processes. That's still evolving. This is not by any stretch of imagination official and mature right now. What we concretely have is we have a framework, we have pilots that are active at 4 NAII centers with their versions of their policy and governance structures that appear to bring value to them. And the next step of that conversation is, how do we link it to national initiatives, national governance systems? How do we link it and give something for the field, because the field desperately wants this? So how do we do that strategically? And that, I'm going to be traveling to focus on those exact questions and next steps in a few weeks.
Is there thinking about, platform or infrastructure on which to build all this stuff? Because I think that's actually a part of where I think all the redundancy winds up happening with a lot of different projects, is that they have to bring up the AI infrastructure on which to run the application, and
right.
They're all going to be doing it separate with separate arrangements or separate
Right.
technologies or
Right.
separate partnerships with the larger companies and all that. So is there kind of an effort to kind of establish?
There are efforts. There is a VA Data Governance Council, which is a very high-level organization with senior leaders, including different administrations, and these concerns are brought up there. VHA has its own Data Governance Council, also talking about the same challenges. I'm working on a platform that is going to be deprecated and the rug's going to be pulled from me possibly next week. And like, how do I adjust? What are we going to? What's the stable transition plan? Like, what is the organization going to do strategically? It just needs to mature and strengthen. There are a lot of people working hard to address the specific concern that you are mentioning, though.
I think there's at least one person raising their hand.
Yeah, Jianji raised her hand. She's one of our VA faculty. Are you still there, Jianji?
Hi, yeah, this is Jianji. Hi,
Yeah, just
Michael.
unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you. Did you?
Hi. Yeah, so
Yeah, I didn't know.
They said they can hear her online.
I can't hear them on.
Oh, really?
Might have to type a question into the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Yeah,
even have
I
the
will.
chat box open though.
Maybe not have it.
Well, yeah, the problem is we're sharing the screen. Hold on a second.
Bianchi, can you type in your question in chat?
Matter, but I can hear you very clearly, Chandra.
There, okay, so,
Did you get, you probably just don't have our volume up. Yeah, their computer audio is muted. This actually happened before too.
yeah, I think it's the
One of
conference
us can
room
type
that
for
the
you.
audio.
okay, yeah.
Okay, I'll type my my question then.
You just need to stand by that microphone right over there.
Okay.
I think they're working on it.
Or maybe.
Can you just read me the question?
She's gonna type it. Can you hear us now?
Okay.
Or maybe if you can talk, and if you're connected to it, the meeting, then your laptop speaker will be
Yeah.
a bigger voice.
Yeah, we can use your laptop.
Yeah.
Can you just unmute off your laptop? You can just listen to them. Can you go ahead? We activated the laptop. Can you repeat your question? I think we'll be able to hear you now.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, Michael. This is
Echo.
I might have to make that.
I'm going to type it in because this echoes there, right?
Feedback issue.
No, that.
Okay. Maybe we can collate all the questions, like email, I can answer offline. However you want. I'm not willing to stay as long as you want.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah. I mean, we could end the presentation, make this more informal if you want. I know this is recorded, or you guys can edit it later. I was also curious what OHSU is doing. I mean, by no means do I think that we are the authoritative, leader. I'm proud that we are trying to do something in this space, and we're kind of compelled to because I was legally required to. So that's a good impetus. But I'm kind of curious and learning from other organizations on their approach on AI governance, not just from responsible AI, but other things that have been brought up. Resource planning, use case development, monitoring, surveillance, and I'd be really interested in that. In fact, the Undersecretary did convene an executive roundtable where we're inviting different healthcare system leaders from Mayo, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and they came and we talked about these specific topics. We definitely want to hear from our academic affiliates on what their approach has been and to see what we can do to adapt.
Has she typed in the question or?
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
John G asked, how do you share your training model across different VA facilities? different businesses have difference in their data collection and structures.
So the question is, how do we share our models?
Your trained model across different VA facilities.
Well, I haven't shared our model in terms of the raw code beyond our current network, the NAII centers that I've been involved with, and that concern hasn't really come up to me quite yet, to be honest, just being blunt and honest. And I can take that question and bring it back to my chief data scientist to see what he says. So I can capture that.
That actually does raise a larger question. You know, there have been challenges translating models across different medical centers. The VA is also in this process of transitioning its electronic health record.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic. Yeah.
And whether how that's going to impact, you know, models that are developed
Yeah.
using the data under Vista versus.
But they obviously have to validate it. So regarding the actual mechanics of it, like there's absolutely a mandate that we validate every model. If we develop at one center at Long Beach, we would have to validate it in DC. So that expectation is there. But in terms of the mechanics and the differences, you know, I've heard some stuff here and there, but hasn't seemed to be have escalated to my level. It's something that I need to like address. You know, I've heard some stuff here. Well, they record SPO2 here differently at this one facility, another one, and you're going to need the SPO2 for your clinical deterioration model work. So those type of stories have come up, absolutely. But in terms of a strategic response, or has this been escalated to a point where I have to take an action? It hasn't.
I think there's a specific level though, and I'm not sure if John, you meant to imply this, but what I heard from what you were saying, there's a specific level of concern with deploying large language models because unlike traditional machine learning models, they kind of have the ability to recapitulate the content they were trained on.
Right.
You remember everything essentially, you don't know when it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So, you know, how does one deploy a model and can you restrict the environments in which it's deployed to ameliorate that risk of exposing, you know, PHI or data that shouldn't be available in one location when it was okay to be available in the location it was trained at.
Absolutely. Large language models bring incredible risk. They also do bring some opportunities we have to acknowledge. So the VA has developed a guidance document in conjunction with the Chief Technology Office, basically telling everyone that you cannot use, you know, these products with VA data. That's straight up in terms of the commercial products out there, you know, your ChatGPT, etc. But there have been instances created where they're hosted on VA approved networks. For example, if you Google, you know, Microsoft FedRAMP approved instance of OpenAI, it exists, right? So there have been instances created for that. Dolly is one as well. That is actually hosted in a secure environment where that data wouldn't go outside of the network. So yes, it is a risk, but the federal government is adjusting to that risk, right? DoD is using large language models, right, in operational theater. You know, it's obviously classified. I don't have classified, security clearance, nor would I be able to share it. But I mean, what's publicly available, that they're using it, but their data is incredibly sensitive. You know, so there are ways to host these in a secure and containerized environment. But are there still risk of hallucinations? Absolutely. Could something go completely wrong and do the wrong thing and say something that sounds authoritative that is actually absolutely wrong? Absolutely. Could it cause harm? Yeah. So yeah, it's a real challenge. The whole principle of transparency. How do we even know how it came out with that output? These are really fundamental issues. Like, how are you going to be under explainability and transparency? Like that model card I showed. How would you draw a model card for ChatGPT 3.5? Like, how would that even look? I don't even know how you would do that.
Well, there are implementations of model cards in Hugging Face for large language models.
Yeah.
But the quality is all over the place.
Right.
It's really variable. I mean, I think the outline of what you have still sort of works. You want to know what it was trained on, what its intended use is.
Right.
There probably needs to be some more standardized nomenclature for defining really what the model does and what its expectations implications are, but you're right, there are a lot of degrees of freedom that might be difficult to document all of it.
Yeah, right. I forgot how many parameters GPT 3.5 was trying on. It was insane. It was insane.
So this is a little different question, but what has been the reception? Is there trust? Do the clinicians trust it? Do patients trust it?
I think we still have a lot to learn, to be honest, right? So, the end value is pretty low. We have only, I think, high single digits of cases reviewed. We need to get that to be a much higher number. We've had some preliminary survey data, but again, those ends are, in the teens. So far, the users in different domains, whether you're what preliminary survey data we have so far has been really positive. They like that they see that the VA is doing this and taking bold steps forward. But there's a lot of work that we need to do on this in terms of getting the inputs from the veteran, the workforce, the administrators, and making sure it suits their needs and then taking their feedback. So
I saw Homer Chin flashed up here. Did you put something in chat?
Homer's question is, how is Cerner/Oracle involved in these AI efforts?
I don't know too much on that, so I don't want to speak to something I'm not an expert on. I know just what's publicly available, right? That Oracle does have significant investments in AI. I know that they want to do this space and collaborate. I've had some meetings with them. But in terms of what's going on, what's called the EHRM, a modernization deploy rollout, that's not within that scope. That's not within that scope. So that's basically as far as I know about it. So I don't have any more to comment on.
And John, she had a follow-up question. Have you thought about AI data readiness? She's working on a project to access AI data readiness and have some difficulties identifying good metrics.
I guess I think need to learn a bit more about the project. I'd be happy to connect offline with her. If there's time permitting, she could explain more, but I don't think I have enough information on that to comment. So
I have her contact information, so I'll send it.
yeah, I've met Jianji before, actually. She's great.
She has a new email, so that's
Okay.
that's the.
Jianji, I know you, so you can reach out.
And there's another of our faculty, Eilish Boudreau, who also emailed me and said she's also at the Portland VA and would like to meet you. We'll connect you up with.
Okay, wonderful. Sounds good.
One more question.
Sure.
It's from Emily. Are more conventional avenues for improving service and improving the lives of clinicians and providers at risk of being sidelined by the enthusiasm for AI solutions?
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, can you repeat that question? I totally recognize healthcare burnout, but this sounds different. Are more conventional avenues for improving service and improving the lives of clinicians and providers at risk? Oh, okay. So it's acknowledging that there is an AI kind of emphasis occurring with this tech sprint to reduce healthcare burnout, but what about non-AI? Like, how do we just address this challenge, period? And I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. There's a whole initiative. I'm trying to remember the name, which is focused. I can find it and get back to. There's a whole initiative to focus on healthcare worker burnout. It really stemmed out of the COVID pandemic, where they're putting in people's network director and medical center performance centers. What are you concretely doing to try to reduce administrative burden, burnout burden? That's a main challenge, right? This is the healthcare worker burden is not just a novel challenge to VA. It affects other health systems as well, and the VA certainly takes it seriously. I would not say I know that every single strategic lane of effort and pillar of effort going on in the non-AI space, since my effort is focused on AI, but I can tell you that the VA takes it very seriously. If you want to reach out to me separately and I can plug you into the resource and the seriousness of how it's being addressed, I can point you to the right people.
Looks like Emily put her camera on, so I don't know if she's trying to.
I don't think they can see me, but happy to take any more questions.
you did ask about what's happening here. The lead at OHSU, and unfortunately he wasn't able to make the talk today, had a conflict, but is David Dorr.
He's online.
Oh, is he
Yeah.
online?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I don't see him there.
Well, he was there earlier. I don't know whether he's still there, but he was.
Oh, okay. So maybe he tried to connect remotely. Anyways, he's kind of heading up the governance side of it, looking at implementing it in the clinical arena. There are some research projects that, make use of machine learning, such as some of the stuff that Aaron does and I do with him. So we're heading down that road.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this probably isn't the best avenue to have, that conversation. I'd be happy to follow up with you, Dr. Dorr, later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we certainly welcome inputs and perspectives from other people. I mean, Gaz and I shared earlier, we're not trying to do this alone. We want to collaborate. We want to learn from the best academic institutions and even partner with industry when appropriate.
Well, thank you.
We'll call
so
it
much for
done.
this.
All right, cool. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Several people are staying for the 1245 PhD postdoc clinical fellow